Hey everybody, my name is Asia and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing the mid-year book freakout tag. I love this tag so much. I love doing it. I love watching people doing it, and I honestly wish we had something similar to this at the end of the year, because of course people are going to make like their best, their worst, maybe they're disappointing, maybe they're surprising, but I feel like this tag really condenses everything all down into one. That's a whole different tangent. Of course I have multiple answers for basically every single question on this tag because it's me. I'm not going to get into the synopses of every single book in depth, especially the ones that are like the most disappointing, because why would I if they're disappointing for me? I'm just going to talk about why they fit the question. I may give a little kind of buzzwords about each book, especially like the ones that are like my favorites, because I want you guys to obviously read them. But I do have some form of wrap up for every single month on my channel so far this year. So if you are curious about any of these books, if any of them pique your interest, you are free obviously to look back at all my wrap ups to kind of get more of a synopsis and more full thought out thoughts about each and every single one of the books that I'm discussing today. Maybe some of them have not yet because I haven't done my June wrap up yet, but it should be coming soon. Before we get into the tag, I'm actually going to be going over my statistics, and I will have a timestamp down below if you want to just skip past this, because I know that it's not for everybody, but I obviously make a huge reading spreadsheet every single year that I share with y'all, and I like to go over my stats because that's the whole point of me making the spreadsheet, is stats. So I'm gonna go over those first. So far this year I've actually read 76 books, but I only have 75 put into here, so I'm just going to be discussing those 75. So I read 75 books, which averages to 6.25 books per month for the entire year, which for the months that I've actually happened so far, it's had 12.5 books a month, which is the most that I've ever read in my entire life. It's really, really crazy to me because the most I've read in a year is 120 books, and I'm literally only like less than 50 away from that. So it's really crazy to me because I'm 27 books ahead of schedule for 100 books, which is already on track to be more than I've read any year previously. And I read 21,323 pages so far this year, which is not a lot, but I read a lot of novellas, and a lot of like my most read genre is pretty short. I've only reread 3 books this year, and I haven't officially DNF'd any books. I've definitely started like a couple and just not continued with them, but I never thought consciously to DNF them. And then books by type, I read 52 novels, 13 novellas, and 2 short story collections, and 8 of those have also been graphic novels or manga. So 70% of my reading has been novels. And then for format read, 26 have been for audio, 11 ebook, 10 physical, and 28 hybrid. So the majority of my reading has been hybrid, which is when I use an audiobook and an ebook and a physical book, and either I switch between them or I do them tandemly. And I've actually read more ebooks this year than physical books, which is also very interesting for me. And then moving on to representation, I've had 34 books, which is 45.3%, have multiple things represented. My categories are queer, POC, disability, mental, religion, multiple, other, and none. So multiple is just obviously where it has multiple, whether it fits in the categories that I've created or not. And then my second biggest category is other, so something that is not queer, POC, disability, mental, or religion. And then I've had 10 for none and 10 for POC, 6 queer, and 2 for mental health. And obviously I've had more probably for queer and POC for sure, but they're just under the multiple category as well. I've read 28 POC authors this year, and about 70% of my reading has been traditionally published, and about 30% has been indie published. And now moving on to audience, 81.3% has been for adult audiences. Then I have 6.7 for new adult, and then 12 for YA. So YA is definitely shrinking every single year. For rating, I haven't had any 1 or 1.5 stars this year. Honestly, I probably should have given some books 1 star, but for me, 1 star means like literally unredeemable, and most books have something that I think is okay about them. Then I've had 5 2 stars, 2 2.5 stars, 10 3 stars, 8 3.5 stars, 20 4 stars, 14 4.5 stars, and 14 5 stars, and 2 that I did not rate because they were memoirs. And then that averages to a 3.9 average rating, which seems pretty good, but I feel like this has been like a mediocre reading year. You can see I have a lot of like 4 stars, which are still good, but I want things that are going to become like my new personality. And then the last thing that I have stats for is genre. So my biggest genre at 38.7% or 29 books is horror. And I know I say horror weird, but that's just how I say it, okay? I know people think I'm saying horror, but I'm saying horror. And then my second biggest category is romance at 21.3% with 16 books, and then thriller at 12 books, which is 16%. And then I've had like 5 contemporary, 8 fantasy, 1 mystery, 2 nonfiction, and 2 sci-fi as well. So those are all my stats, and now we are going to get into the first question, which starts off with a bang, and that is the best book that you read so far this year. And as I said, for every question I have multiple answers. So my top 5 books for the year, if you really look at them, are actually all horror, but for this purpose of this tag, I wanted to discuss one from basically like all my biggest genres. So my top book of the year so far, and this is my top horror book, is Slewfoot by Brahm. This was actually one of my Patreon book club picks, my very first one actually, and I absolutely adored this book. This is such a amazing good for her story. We follow Abatha, and she's a widow in 1666 New England, and she begins to take over her farm that her husband left behind when he died, and it's very much struggling, and she actually gets help from someone named Slewfoot. And this is obviously horror, but it is literally such a good for her beautiful story. It's slow paced in the beginning, but it's really building the tension and building a beautiful relationship. I don't think that's discussed enough throughout the story, but there's a beautiful relationship in this as well that I absolutely loved, and I loved the writing in this, and it also has these stunning pictures in it that I just adore. And I had to have an honorable mention for just plain horror, and that is Cirque Berserk. This one I just recently read, but this was such a fun slasher. We follow a group of teenagers as they had their senior night. They thought it was kind of boring, whatever, so they decide, as a last little hurrah, they decide to go to this supposedly haunted amusement park that had a mass killing from teenagers in it in the 80s. And surprise, surprise, there's some slicing, there's some dicing, and this one I actually really enjoyed the characters, and this one's also written by a Black author, which most horror and most slashers are not written by Black authors, and then even less so do they have main characters that are Black. We do have a Black main character in this, and actually an Indigenous main character as well. I love that representation. I honestly thought this was such a fun slasher, and it's so fun, but it did have a little bit of depth to it, which I enjoy. My favorite extreme horror that I've read so far this year is No One Writes for Free by Judith Sonnet. I absolutely adored this one. This one really showed me why I read extreme horror. This one's actually in a reading vlog, so if you want to check out all my thoughts, I would definitely check that one out because I talk about this book extensively in that reading vlog, but I just ate this one up. We follow a woman, and she is driving her 2 grown children back to college, and she goes into like this little gas station, and when she comes out, there is a man in the car holding her children at gunpoint. And we really dive into the depths and darkness of humanity and how people will do things just because they're sick and twisted and not for any reason. A lot of people think people do things because they want money or fame or power, but a lot of times people do things just because they get off on it, and that's really what this book dives into. This one's not for the faint of heart at all. There's some very gruesome, disgusting scenes that will stick with me forever, and Judith Sonnet has a way of writing that really is so enchanting. Then I also wanted to mention something that is not traditional, like a graphic novel or a manga, and my favorite has definitely been Uzumaki. This is another horror. That's why I said my top favorites of the year really are majority horror, but Uzumaki really surprised me because this was my first manga that I've ever read, and I've heard such good things about Junji Ito, but I just wasn't sure if I would click with the art style or the writing and just how it's told, but I absolutely love this one. We follow a town that is overtaken by spirals and how that the spirals literally consume their town from the inside out. We follow one main character and also her best friend, and we see from their perspective how the spirals are affecting everybody in their lives, from their parents to their peers to their teachers. And it's literally crazy. I love the art style in this. It's literally so graphic and gruesome. I'm gonna try and find a picture for y'all. Here is just one image of art that you can see. I just loved every single thing about this, and I thought Junji Ito really went in. This story is still one that I'm actually deconstructing to this day, trying to understand the meaning and everything behind it because there's so many layers. But this one literally just my favorite romance that I've read so far this year is What a Match by Mimi Grace. This one is also one that actually surprised me, so I guess I could put it under that question, but this one is definitely my top romance of the year. I loved this one so much. It was so beautiful and fun, but it had heart to it, and that's what I love. In this we follow a woman, and she's just about to hit 30, and she is still single. So she is kind of down on her luck and decides to join a matchmaking service. It's not really like a dating app, it's more of like a service that they actually do, and they match you to other people. It's like really intensive actually. So she decides to join this, and she actually kind of has a hiccup as well because her brother's best friend, who he co-owns this boxing gym with, has actually been down on his luck as well because his apartment is currently going underneath some sort of like extermination or something like that, so he can't stay in there for like a month. And so her brother actually asked him to stay with her while he is kind of in between places, or you know, can't stay at his place. And I just love this one so much. It was so cute, and the male love interest in this is literally so grumpy and so broody, which I absolutely love. And this is also a black romance, and there's a scene in here with a pumpkin, and that scene will forever be in my head. It's literally stuck in there, and obviously it's like forced proximity. It was just so good. My favorite thriller of the year might actually come at a surprise because it's not one that has much depth to it at all, but that is The Perfect Marriage. This one literally pulled me straight out of a reading slump. I love this one so much. We follow a woman, and she finds out that her husband had a mistress because the mistress ends up dead and he becomes arrested for her murder. And she's actually a lawyer, the wife is, and she decides the only person that can really save her husband is herself. So she decides to become his lawyer in his trial where he murdered his mistress, supposedly. And this one had so many twists and turns, and the last page left me reeling. I just absolutely love this one, and as I said, it pulled me straight out of a reading slump, so I have to give it props for that. One honorable mention that I do have for a thriller is Blacktop Wasteland. I love this one as well. I recently read this one too. We follow Bug. He used to be a getaway driver, but he kind of has cleaned up his life and, you know, just wants to have a nice life with his wife and kids. But they are starting to go under some financial struggles, so he decides to take one last job. S.A. Cosby just has a beautiful writing, and I love his characters so much. The next question is the best sequel that you read so far this year, and I haven't read a ton, and some of the books that are my favorites, like Cirque Berserk and What a Match, are actually technically sequels, but I have not read any of the other books in this series, so they're more like companions. And so my actual favorite sequels so far this year, one has definitely been Saga Volume 10. I have missed Saga so much. They took such a long hiatus, and at the end of Volume 9, there was a really big plot twist that changed the course of the entire story. So I just loved being back in this world with these characters. It was just so amazing and like comforting. If you don't know what Saga is about, it is an epic fantasy sci-fi where there are basically like different species that are fighting, and this couple comes together, one from each species, and they end up having a child. She's basically telling her and her parents' story from the future, and it is so good and I love it. Another sequel that I really loved was actually Heartstopper Volume 4. I really love this volume. This one and Volume 3 are my favorites, but this one was a little bit darker. It went into talks of mental health and eating disorders, which I highly appreciated. I thought that it was done so well for the age group, and obviously everybody knows what Heartstopper is about. I haven't even watched the show yet, but there's a whole show and everything like that. But basically we follow Nick and Charlie, and they're on the same rugby team, I think it is, and they end up having little crushes on each other, and it expands from there. The last sequel that I want to mention, because this one is actually like a full novel, is Fumbled by Alexa Martin, and this is the second book in the Intercepted series, which I loved Intercepted. I also loved this one. In Fumbled, we follow a woman, and she's actually a single mom. She got pregnant by her high school sweetheart and kind of fled. So now it is years later, and she ends up running into her high school sweetheart, and he has no idea that he's a father at all, but that is kind of a rude awakening for him, and he is on an NFL team. I love this one so much because it's kind of like single parent trope, which is actually one of my faves. I love a single parent. Something about it. I don't really like the kids to be in the book a ton, but I just love that kind of dynamic that develops. Single parent to me is kind of like forced proximity because they're kind of forced to interact in a way, and so I just love this one, and I really like Alexa Martin's writing, and I love a sports romance. Sports romances are going to do it for me every single time. Question 3 is a new release you haven't read yet but you want to. I have so many. I'm not going to get into the synopses of all of these because I haven't read them, so I don't know too much, but Yellowface is definitely one that I've been itching to read. This is the R. Kwong That's Calling My Name. It's about a woman, and her best friend dies and leaves this manuscript behind, and she publishes it under a kind of racially ambiguous name and basically commits Yellowface, and it's about that because her best friend, I believe, was Asian and she is white. Then also I want to read All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby. This seems like it's going to be my favorite S.A. Cosby because it's more of like about a serial killer and it has a detective perspective, which is something that I absolutely love. So I'm literally crying, throwing up, and I'm about to read it so soon. And then I also have The Only One Left by Riley Sager. I haven't read this one yet. It's about a woman who becomes a caretaker to this woman who is accused of a Lizzie Borden-esque murders where she murdered her whole family, and it actually takes place in the 80s, which I did not know. And I also have Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. Everybody loved this one, and I actually reread Ninth House at the beginning of the year so I could read this, and I still haven't gotten around to it, but soon. I promise soon. Ninth House is a dark academia story. I'm sure you've heard so much about it, but I need to get to Hellbent. And the last one that I have is The Nanny. This is the romance that's been calling to me. It's about a nanny, and I believe she has like an OnlyFans or is like a porn star or something like that, so it's really like intriguing to me, and I've heard really good things about it. Next up is the most anticipated release for the second half of the year, and I definitely have a lot. I make anticipated releases video every single quarter. My one for quarter 3 will be coming out at the beginning of July, and so I have definitely a couple. The first one that I heard is Burn the Negative, and I haven't heard anybody talk about this, but this is one that is coming out, and it is about a horror movie set, which just intrigued me so much, so I have to read it. Then I also have Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo. I love Elizabeth Acevedo, and I've been waiting for her to come out with another release because it's been a couple years for sure, and this is actually her adult debut, so I'm really excited for this one. I have no idea what it's about, assuming it has something to do with family, but I'm just really anticipating this one because I just love Elizabeth Acevedo's writing and characters so much. And the last one that I'm going to mention is Midnight is the Darkest Hour, which is by Ashley Winstead, and I really loved The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead, and I enjoyed In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, so I'm really excited for this one. I know she's going to deliver something amazing. I don't think there's even a synopsis yet. I have no clue what it's about, but I'm highly anticipating it. Question 5 is biggest disappointment, and I actually have 5. I have quite a few. So the first one is Fake It Till You Bake It. This was just a romance that ended up really disappointing me, and this one is basically about a football player, and he runs this bakery, and I thought it was gonna be super cute, but it ended up just being hella boring, and it has fake dating in it as well, as you say, fake it till you bake it, and literally it just ended up being so boring and disappointing, especially because I love black romances so much. They are my favorite romances. I don't even like traditional like rom-com contemporary romances, but when it's written by a black author, I normally eat them up because I just love and relate to the characters so much, and I love black love so much. But this one, it was just so disappointing. I also recently read The Deep by Nick Cutter, and I hated the ending of this book. It's basically just about underneath the ocean. I really like the trope as well, so I was really expecting more from this, but I hated the ending. It was super boring and nothing happened, and it could have taken place anywhere isolated. It could have been space, it could have been a remote rainforest location, or the ocean. It could have been anywhere and been the same, and so it just really didn't deliver on like the ocean vibes that I wanted, because I love ocean horror, but it also had an ending that I literally hated with an absolute fiery passion. Another one that was super boring is Road of Bones. I was so anticipating this one, but I did not like it either. This one is like a found footage one that takes place near the Arctic Circle, and nothing happened in this story. Literally nothing happened. I mean, some people, like, they had some survival situations, but it really wasn't fast paced. It wasn't heart pumping. I was just like, okay, and what? And maybe it's because all the characters in this, like the main characters for the most part, are men. Maybe I just didn't feel attachment to them, so I just didn't care. A character did end up passing away in this that did hit me in my feels a little bit, but it was still disappointing regardless. I also have episode 13, another found footage one. I love Stuff for the Children by Craig DeLuise so much, and this one's like a found footage story, but again, nothing happened. Literally, the ending I really enjoyed. It was giving as above so below, but basically I only like this much. Okay, the beginning I can understand, had some setup, but this whole middle section right here, literally nothing happened, and it was absolutely so boring. Like, I feel like this could have been like a novella or something, but I did like the mixed media elements as well, and the audiobook really goes into that. So some people I know don't like it because they feel like it's too much, but I enjoyed that and the ending, but really like nothing happened at all in this story. It was so long, like it's over 400 pages, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's 400 something pages over for nothing to happen except the end, you know what I'm saying? And I feel like it didn't even use that time to adequately build enough tension. And the last disappointing book that I have is Everything the Darkness Eats by Eric LaRocca. I don't even want to talk about this one because Eric LaRocca is literally one of my favorite authors ever, and it just hurts my heart. But this is one that, again, I feel like was boring. Maybe that's just like a running trend this year where it was just kind of boring. The ending I feel like was okay. it did kind of have like a moment that went extreme. I feel like Eric LaRocca was also trying to conform to this novel format and this like novel structure, but Eric LaRocca writes best in a kind of nonsensical novella way. So something about this just didn't click with me, and I'm really sad about it. Like, this one was probably actually the most disappointing because I had such high hopes, because it is literally like top 3 favorite authors ever. Then I have biggest surprise. So I have Vanessa Jared's Got a Man. This is another romance that I really enjoyed. I don't know, something about romance and me just haven't been on as good of terms. So this one, me loving it so much, is really surprising. We follow a 40-something-year-old divorcee, and she's living her best life, you know what I'm saying? She actually got a pretty big payout from that divorce, so love it for her, get that coins. But one day, this cop ends up showing up on her doorstep, talk about some, oh, your husband or ex-husband is engaged now to my sister, and he's telling everybody that you're dead, but I know that you're not dead because I did a background check on him, and he also has your grandmother's ring. I don't know if he says that, but she figures out that he proposed to her with her grandmother's ring that was her family heirloom, so obviously she wants that back. So she decides to help him with this, and I honestly had no idea what this is about. I thought it was literally new adult, not about a 40-something-year-old divorcee, so it ended up surprising me because I knew nothing about it. Another one that's really surprised me, I already talked about, but that is The Perfect Marriage. This one is just a super hyped TikTok thriller, and I knew it wasn't going to have that much substance to it, so I just really was expecting to have a good time, but not a phenomenal time. But I had a phenomenal, fantastic, spectacular time. Another romance that also surprised me is A Hunger Like No Other by Cressley Cole. I've had this one on my shelf for a while because my friend Nicole actually bought it for me. Thank you, Nicole. Here is her little note. God, why was it stuck in there so much? Like, literally she's bet now from me trying to take this out. Okay, well, that was interesting. But thank you so much, Nicole. I'm sorry I just bent your book. But this one I just knew nothing about, and I haven't read a paranormal romance in a while, so it really surprised me how much I ended up loving this. This was a 5-star for me. It follows a woman, and she's like half Valkyrie, which is like fae, and half vampire, and she ends up getting kidnapped by this werewolf who just escaped from getting tortured by vampires, and that was just really fun and interesting. Question 7 is favorite new author, debut, or new to you, and I don't really like this question because to me a favorite author is never really an author that I read one book from. But I do have one answer for this, and that is obviously McKay. Okay, McKay, if you don't know, for McKay's book vlogs, literally the king of extreme horror and monster smut, okay, came out with a book. And this book was literally so good. It's very much all my favorites of the year. This one really went into, again, like the darkness and depths of humanity, which I loved, and it was told in such an interesting way. I really felt for the characters. Like, I literally remember the character's name in this. Her name is Jeanette. Like, I never remember any characters' names. Like, you will see I'm about to answer some questions about fave characters and stuff, and I literally had to look up their names even though they're my faves. But this one, I remember Jeanette. I remember every single thing that happened in the story, and this book literally made me vomit. So I also have my eye on Mimi Grace for sure, who wrote What a Match. I'm really excited to read more of her romances, and Junji Ito as well. Excited to read more of his work. And then an author that I read for the second time this year that I really enjoyed was Alice Feeney. I really enjoyed when I read Rock, Paper, Scissors last year, but I didn't really think anything of it. But I picked up Daisy Darker not expecting to like this because it's like a closed door lock room mystery, which is not my fave. But I ended up really loving this one, and it also pulled me out of a reading slump. So I'm really hoping that I can read another banger from Miss Alice and put her on one of my favorite thriller authors ever. Question 8 is newest fictional crush. I always have to put Tony from What a Match on here because he is just the grumpy man of my dreams. He, you know, has a little entrepreneur side to him. He's grumpy. He was just so delicious, okay? I just loved everything about him, and you know, I want him to be my man. And then also have Deanna or Jessica from The Girl in 60. My little OnlyFans queen. Like, I loved her so much, even though she's a little crazy, she's a little murdery. I actually love that. Like, give me a little murder, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is how I know that I'm toxic, because you know how people are like, you shouldn't romanticize Joe from you, and will. Just like with her, even though she's a little serial killer-y, a little murdery, yep, and will romanticize her. I love her. The next question is Newit's favorite character, and I have to say Bug from Blacktop Wasteland. I love this man. He's like giving like an uncle to me, and I feel like he would just like teach me how to like change my tire, and I still wouldn't know how to, but we would be bonding anyway, so it would be okay. And he just like loves it, his little kids and his wife so much that like I just want to be invited to the cookout, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then also I loved Rochelle from Cirque Berserk. I can't talk too much about why I love her character because it's a huge spoiler, but Rochelle is the black girl in this book, and I just loved her history, her character, everything about her. And then also I have to mention Abatha from Slewfoot. As I said, this is a very much good for her story. I loved her character arc. I thought it was so beautiful. She went from one thing to something completely different, but she always had like this spark and fire in her that I loved from the very beginning, and I just loved her so much. Next up is a book that made you cry, and no book actually has made me cry this year like Sob, which I definitely had one last year, Wolf Song by TJ Klune, but as I said, one book did make me have a very extreme reaction, and that is Them. I literally vomited, and that is in a reading vlog, not the vomit, but me talking about the vomit. Yeah, this book definitely made me vomit, and I did tear up in this book as well at the end. But some books did make me tear up this year, and that's actually the two memoirs that I read, I'm Glad My Mom Died and Know My Name by Chanel Miller. These books really are so impactful and heartfelt and just have so much to say and are so beautiful. They definitely had me tearing up. The 11th question is a book that made you happy, and obviously I have to say Heartstopper. That one is so cute and heartfelt, and even though it went into some darker topics this time around in volume 4, I still was so happy and got so many butterflies and just was giddy about it. So that was really one that made me happy. And also The Big Score. This is one that I buddy read with Haley and Aspen on Haley's Patreon reading sprints, and the whole experience just made me so happy. Even though it was such like a Wattpad story, just the whole experience was so amazing, and I had such a good time reading it with them. And then also I wanted to mention Goal by Alexandria House. I read from Alexandria House previously, but this one's definitely my favorite, and the reason that it made me happy is because the reason I read The Big Score was because I was like, I want a black hockey romance, and this was not even a black hockey romance, it's interracial, but The Big Score is giving Wattpad, you know what I'm saying? But Goal is literally a black hockey romance with a, it's not really single parent, but like kind of parental things going on and a nanny. And I just loved the story so much. It was so cute, and it's definitely another one of my favorite romances of the year. Question 12 is the most beautiful book you've acquired so far this year, and I honestly literally don't even know what I bought this year, but I'm just gonna say Slewfoot. I technically got this at the end of last year for Christmas, but I'm just gonna count it, okay, because I think this book is stunning. I love the cover, I love the end pages, and then obviously I said that there's these beautiful full color illustration pictures of every like main character within the story. At the beginning of each chapter there is also a little picture as well, and it is just so stunning with these illustrations that I had to put this as my answer. Favorite book to movie adaptation, and I honestly haven't seen that many this year. I know Daisy Jones came out, which I watched like one episode of, and then Heartstopper I haven't watched, which I think came out last year, but I haven't watched that either. And then the only one that I've actually seen this year is Knock at the Cabin, but this is actually one that I really liked. This is one of the only instances where I like the movie better than the book, and I know a lot of people are going to be up in arms about that because people love Cabin at the End of the World, but I really loved the movie, and something about the book just didn't click for me, but I loved the way that it was told in the movie, and it was so good to me. I loved it. And then the last question is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? And literally, like, all of them. I don't know how I've read so many books this year, but I feel like I still have so many books that I haven't read. I feel like I've wasted my time on so many mediocre books, but I know that there's some bangers out there. So obviously, my anticipated releases that I've mentioned so far and that are coming up, I want to catch up on my NetGalley score, so those ones as well, which are releases from years past as well. And then also, I have my 23 books to read in 2023, which includes my 12 challenge, which is 12 books to read by 12 friends in 12 months. That's a mouthful to say, but 12 of the 23 books are for that, and I definitely want to try and prioritize that because I was prioritizing it for like the first like 2-3 months, and then I was like, F it, after that I was like, what challenge? But I definitely want to try and prioritize those, so I will definitely be trying to get to those as well. And that's really it. Obviously my physical TBR, I have a whole bunch of things that I want to read all the time, always, so this question is really hard to answer. So those are all the questions. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun doing it and just kind of ranting and raving about my faves and my most disappointing books of the year so far. So if you made it to the end of this video, put a little carousel emoji down below for Cirque Berserk, and I will see y'all in my next one. Bye everybody.